Buenos días. ¿Estamos vivos? Okay. Me alegro. These are hard acts to follow, I got to tell you that. But I will do my best impersonation of an actor and a trustee and a university president. In any case, let's thank them, because without President Rapp and Trustee Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, Melissa Mark Viverito, and other people in the city that are pulling for us, this event would not have been possible. So let's give them thank you. I hope that I get to do that often when I see them. So it's a great pleasure to be here today sharing this event with all of you. A lot has happened since we met the first time last year. As Trustee Cortez Vasquez exposed, a lot has happened. We are really in a historical period in our life, in our history. Today, what we want to do is dissect that, divide that into pieces that we can actually discuss in smaller groups. We intend to have three parts of this conversation. The first one, of course, has to do with what's happening in Puerto Rico, and all the panels in the morning are going to be devoted to that, to the economic, political, humanitarian crisis, to the public debt and PROMESA, to the Oversight Board, the budget, the debt service, and we have top specialists that know those areas in and out. From that, we're going to move to what is the impact of these changes on Puerto Rican communities stateside. We want to talk about migration, how that has affected the footprint of the Puerto Rican population in the United States, and the set of challenges and opportunities that are open to stateside Puerto Ricans as a result of those changes, historical changes. And finally, we want to talk a little bit about the solidarity movement. Tomorrow, all the sessions will be devoted to the question of engagement, action. What is it that we can do? What we can do individually as organizations, what we can do together in coalitions and building points of convergence, and more importantly, what is the role of Centro moving forward? And that's not a minor question. So what is the situation in Puerto Rico? The reality is that there is not one crisis in Puerto Rico. There are actually several converging crises in Puerto Rico. To begin with, obviously, we have an economic crisis that led to a fiscal crisis, but that has now is resulting now in a humanitarian crisis. And concomitant to all that, I will say that we are in a political crisis as well. If you look at the last indicators of that over the last, I will say, 4 or 5 election cycles, the patterns of behavior of the Puerto Rican voting population have changed in some substantial ways. The reality is that austerity is with us. There's no way to escape this situation. The projections for economic growth are not as great as we would like them to be. They're no longer borrowing is an option. You know, our government bonds instruments are rated at the junk bond level, and there is no escape to finding resources to move forward. I will submit to you that that's a responsibility that is shared also with the U.S. government. We have a significant deterioration of social conditions in Puerto Rico. And we have seen the migration of over 500,000 people over the last decade. That's a substantive number of people that represent about 10% of the population in Puerto Rico. To give you some indicators, about 46% of the people in Puerto Rico are below the poverty rate. The unemployment rate is twice the rate in the United States, more than twice. It's about 12% here, about 5% in the US. And household income remains stagnant. It's about 1/3 of what it is in the United States. To begin with, as Trustee Cortez Vasquez explained, we owe over $40 billion in pensions to employees in Puerto Rico. If something were to happen to those pensions, the economic impact, not just in terms of a humanitarian crisis, getting out of the hole in Puerto Rico will be almost impossible. The pension funds that have sold assets, they have depleted reserve, and they are now to check-to-check situation. The government will have to pay as they go. So as a result of that, the U.S. Congress decided to create a law, the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act, so-called PROMESA, and it enacted that at the end of June last year. That law has several components, as you probably know by now. It allowed the Oversight Board to go through an audit and restructuring of the debt. By the way, the restructuring of the debt, we entered Title III. I will say a few more words about that. But the reality is that we don't have a clear pathway towards the audit yet. That's a most urgent conversation that we should have here today. It established, gave the Oversight Board powers to develop a long-term fiscal plan and budgets that will be consistent with that long-term fiscal plan. It gives powers, legal powers that supersede all local laws, by the way. No expenditures can be budgeted in the Puerto Rico government without the approval. All contracts over 100,000, and by the way, they can go lower than 100,000. So it's a very tough situation for the government of Puerto Rico. They have, as I would explain, gone through the process. And to this point, I think the government of Puerto Rico, especially this administration, has established some parameters moving forward with the Oversight Board that are important to dissect and understand as we move forward. But in Puerto Rico, there have been mixed reactions. There's no sugarcoating this, okay? They're changing opinions. And at one point, right before PROMESA was enacted, support was under 50% in the polls. But right before the elections, after all kind of protests and everything else, support went up to about 62% of the people who responded to the poll. How do you explain this? It's not simple to understand that at the same time you have, certain type of reactions and protests and all that. On the other hand, you have this support for the Oversight Board. Well, Puerto Ricans, 95% of Puerto Ricans in a poll conducted in May of 2016 stated, 95% of them, they agree with the statement that Puerto Rico is governed by a few groups that seek their own benefit, that distrust in government. And it's not just one administration. It's the whole question of the political establishment in Puerto Rico. They have lost faith that these folks can take them out of the crisis, for good or bad, reasonable or not, truthful or not. That's what people believe. They have lost trust in their institutions. And that's the political crisis that I'm referring to, because restoring that faith is not simple. On the other hand, when you ask people what institutions they do trust, the FBI, the Supreme Court, and at that time, the Oversight Board. Go figure this one. As a matter of fact, yes. Next panels, go figure this one. Okay? How do you reconcile the sentiment of the Puerto Rican population with getting out of the crisis? How do you pull the efforts of these people to actually pull out of the hole? So all in all, the Oversight Board is perceived as a mechanism to improve transparency and accountability, to clean up the public administration. Have they done that? Would they do that? Can they do that? I don't know the answer to those questions. Well, the process that established PROMESA, I will call it a ping pong. The way it starts is the governor files, in this case, a draft of a fiscal plan. The board, shortly after, a couple of weeks after March 1st, when they submitted the fiscal plan, submitted amendments. Those amendments were widely acknowledged to be what, Nobel Prize Stiglitz called draconian, okay? They were devastating. Governor Rosselló rejected some of those, instituted other savings and revenue raising to balance the budget. There's no way to not balance the budget, by the way. I want you to understand that. There's no borrowing. You can't balance the budget any other way than with revenues or cuts, okay? There is going to be austerity. The whole question is how that is distributed. And Governor Rosselló rejected cuts in pensions, rejected furloughs to public employees, and rejected cuts in Christmas bonuses, okay? He instituted other revenue raising and other cuts in the budget in response to the board. This was all approved both in the fiscal plan, and now we are in the midst of the budget process that follows the same ping-pong process. Governor already submitted a budget. The board is revising that. As I understand, they wanted some revisions, and the governor will respond until they settle on a balanced budget. So the math for this, as an economist, I can tell you, I always look for the math. The math is very simple. With declining revenues, what is paid in debt reduces public services. There's no other alternative. You either cut services, right, or you pay the debt. So what did the Oversight Board, in conjunction with the governor of Puerto Rico, agree? Well, they agree on a severe cut in the repayment of the debt, the so-called debt services, okay? On average, over the next 10 years, they're going to be paying about a quarter of what is owed to bondholders. That's a significant cut in debt services. There is no way that any one single creditor, okay, not Wall Street, no hedge funds, no one is going to get full repayment of their debt. There's no money to pay. There's going to be a cut in pay services. This is not to be confused with the so-called haircut. I don't have time here to explain that, but maybe in the sessions you have more time to explain that. Debt services have to do with interest and paying of principal, okay? The haircut refers to the present value of the new securities that are given to the bondholders in payment of their current debt. Okay, the haircut could be around the value of that debt right now, which is about 50 cents on the dollar. And if you let me go with this, you will be bored, and we will not be out of here. But the point is that the fiscal plan that has been established, okay, by the Oversight Board in conjunction with Governor Rosselló calls for a severe reduction in debt services, and that's not to be lost. So the other part of the PROMESA process is the so-called Title IV. It's a period where the government negotiates with bondholders. That goes to the whole question of the restructuring of the debt. This is where the haircut comes in. And that, in May 3rd, was ended, so to speak, with Title III, which is the provision in PROMESA that tells creditors we're going to go to federal court. And that's where we are right now. A judge was appointed, and now from here on, it will follow pretty much Chapter 9 regulations. It's not exactly Chapter 9, but it's very close to Chapter 9. And in the debt crisis panel that you will participate this afternoon, we have perhaps one of the top lawyers in bankruptcy, Carlos Cuevas, who's going to probably try to explain better than I can what that process is going to look like.
You're doing a good job.
Thank you. So one of the most important things that PROMESA did was to establish a task force on economic growth. Why? Because if you just look at austerity and you look at repayment of the debt, without economic growth, we're going nowhere. We're going nowhere fast. So in the absence of economic growth, now here's the problem, and this is part of the mandate to you, try to figure this out. Can we really have economic growth without putting in order our fiscal house? I find it very difficult to believe. For one, Congress people believe that if they throw money at Puerto Rico, not that they want to, but if they were to do that, it may go to debt repayment, like it went in Greece and other parts of the world, and it will not go literally to spike economic growth. I think our task is to figure out a shortcut to those things. And I think the shortcut has to do with Congress' responsibility to respond to the needs of the Puerto Rico people. We cannot let Congress bail out of this one. They have a responsibility. They have a responsibility in providing $900 million for health care. They have to provide parity for the child insurance, and they have to provide Medicaid support, as I said before. It would be nice if they add their earned income tax credit. All of those things were recommended by the Congressional Task Force, bipartisan task force on economic growth. And I think that's our call for action with respect to Congress' responsibility. I already talked about the responsibility of the political class in Puerto Rico and the economic and financial institutions in Puerto Rico. But Congress cannot be left off the hook. We got to pay attention to a shared responsibility getting out of this problem. Now, in response to last year's conference, we had, probably about 200 recommendations, by the way. Now, what we did was to try to find common recommendations among different panels. And I'm going to, as I move along, I will try to tease out a few of those. But one of the most important ones was that we needed accurate, nonpartisan, non-biased information about what's happening in Puerto Rico. For that purpose, right there, around at the end of the summer, we created a roundtable on Puerto Rico to look at economic development, to look on PROMESA, to really assess. We brought about 15 experts on bankruptcy, on the health, on various aspects, and we have met every month since then. And every month, we try to analyze what's going on, and then we produce briefs. And we have some of the staff, Centro staff here that produce those briefs. And we created a section in our website, it's called Puerto Rico News, that actually captures, it's a repository. You can go there and you're going to find everything that's been said about the debt crisis in Puerto Rico over the last 2 or 3 years. You're going to find every document. You're going to find links to the congressional reports. You're going to find everything that you need. By the way, we're a library and archives. So we created a repository, a reference for librarians, but for the rest of you. So I invite you to visit Puerto Rico News. It's divided by sections, and every week we update that. Sometimes we put a couple of briefs every week. The briefs are short, 1 or 2 pages, but they summarize what's going on various aspects, from healthcare to this to that. And it's there for the take. So please go visit that page. And I know there are some, I recognize some members, I know Carlos is here. But in any case, any other, Gretchen, Carlos, anyone else from raise your hands. I want to acknowledge you guys. Okay, so thank you for doing volunteer work. Who's there, Eric? Yeah, fantastico, gracias. So in any case, these people are volunteering their time. They are experts. They're very engaged. Oh, Dennis is there too. So anyway, we have a great group of advisors to understand what's happening in Puerto Rico. Tony Suarez is here. I don't see him. Anyway, we have a good group. Now I want to turn into the question of how is that really affecting Puerto Ricans in the stateside, okay? And we're living a historical moment. If you think that what's going on in Puerto Rico is of historical proportions, you got to understand what's happening in our community stateside to understand the real magnitude of this situation that we're experiencing. We really have to talk about 9 million Puerto Ricans, as Lorraine Cortez suggested. The notion that you can talk about those people in the island and those people stateside, the reality is that more than ever we're entangled together, okay? And therefore, the diaspora has certain responsibility to address not just what's happening in Puerto Rico, but to address the impact of that situation on our communities. And I want you to look at this graphic again. I update this graphic every time I go out. That's the population in Puerto Rico and the United States, the Puerto Rican population. About 2005, there were equal number of Puerto Ricans on both sides, 3.8 million. Fast forward a decade, population in Puerto Rico has declined 10%, and the population in the United States have ballooned to more than 5 million, about 5.5 million, okay? That's a population swing significant. 5.5 minus 3.5 is 2 million difference in population now living in the States. 2/3 in the States, 1/3 in Puerto Rico. We never seen that before, by the way. We're really a people of diaspora. The majority of us are here. Now, keep in mind that 70% of these people that live stateside were born in the United States. My children, they were born in the United States. And their primary language is English, it's not Spanish. So we no longer can sustain an island-centric view of who the Puerto Rican is. What is the identity? What is our makeup as a people? The reality is that Puerto Ricans are growing not just in Florida, but we're spread throughout the country. The New South, that area of the old Confederate states from Virginia to Florida, has grown as well. Florida obviously has grown a lot. Texas has grown a lot. So there is a population shift. People are migrating out of New York to the suburbs, to the region, to Connecticut, to New Jersey. But there is still a substantial number of migrants that come to New York. Second largest state with migrants, Pennsylvania. Go figure that one out, not New York. So the patterns of Puerto Rican migration have changed substantially, but this is also driven by internal mobility. People from New York going to Florida, people from Texas going to New York, and so on and so forth. And it has to do with economic progress, by the way. Most indicators of socioeconomic progress for Puerto Ricans have improved over the last decade. We're not even close to parity with the white majority, but we definitely have improved it because we're going to the suburbs, because we move to areas where we can earn a better income and so forth. So this is not all bad. There are opportunities for us, okay? And it's important to keep in mind. We typically talk about all the problems that we have. I want to spend some time talking about opportunity. And it's opportunity for political empowerment, for cultural engagement, and for economic development. So let me say a few words about each one of those. We have the opportunity to create an effective action network, and that's what this is part of. There are over 200 stateside community and civic organizations with a Puerto Rico or a Puerto Rican mission. There are over 100 stateside so-called Latino organizations that serve Puerto Ricans. So it's not just the ones that are dedicated fully to Puerto Ricans. And there are close to 150 state and local Puerto Rican elected officials that increased after the last election. So we have the opportunity to create a more unified voice for Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican. If we just could get together and talk. And by the way, this is not in my script, so it's not approved by my powers to be. But I gotta tell you, we have this tendency to focus on what divides us. Por favor, vamos a tratar, let's try hard. Let's focus on things that we can actually do together. I mean, there are plenty of things that divide us. But we don't have to agree on everything. I know there are people here who don't agree with the administration, but they're giving the front fight on health care. Can we unite around that? Por favor. Por favor. Let's just focus. Okay? So we have been engaged in a diaspora solidarity movement and coalition building over the last couple of years, really. Now, I see a lot of actors in that movement. Today, we have representatives in this conference of close to 100 organizations. If you look at the panelists, 100. Last year, we had close to 50. So there are people out there that are trying to make a difference. I'm going to mention a few of the organizations that I see represented here. The National Puerto Rican Agenda, they're organizing in about 10 states. The Caucus of Puerto Rican Elected Officials, hey. The Puerto Rican Day Parade and the Hispanic Federation has sponsored voter registrations and so forth. Somos in Albany and Puerto Rico have engaged, as you saw in the graphics, in rallies and so forth. You have Vamos for Puerto Rico. I see a couple of people here from that coalition. Yay. There are all regional alliances like the Puerto Rican Agenda de Illinois, 40 years strong. There are new regional alliances, 1 or 2 years old. Pennsylvania for Puerto Rico, Iniciativa Boricua in Florida, the Puerto Rico, Alianza por Puerto Rico in Massachusetts, and I can go on and on with the list. Senadores, esto, lo otro, there is a whole movement that is happening out there. But we are all making individualized efforts as organizations, okay? So let's have a conversation about how it is that this diaspora solidarity movement can actually coalesce and build coalitions that go across sectors to have a more unified Puerto Rican voice. This was evident in the last presidential elections. Voter registration improved in swing states like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania. We elected the first congressperson from Florida, Darren Soto. There were Kissimmee. We wiped out the city council. We elected the first person for Orange County. So this is happening. It's being translated in Miami. Thank you, Natasha, acordándome, yeah. So, the movement is happening and there is a response. So as those things happen, we are in a better position to articulate a national response to how Congress make decisions regarding Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans. And I want to talk about another aspect that we rarely talk. Pardon me, I'm an economist. But that increase in Puerto Rican population stateside has led to a massive growth in purchasing power. And it's still not harnessed. Okay, we still don't have a national organization of business associations, or the parades and fairs are not organized in a purchasing block that they go to JetBlue and others and say, hey, support us. All 100 Puerto Rican Day parades around the country and festivals, okay? So I'm saying, look at this graphic. Where is the money? Is it in Puerto Rico, in the island? Can we inject some of this money back into the island? Well, we need to make money too, but we can. So as a result of that, the rate of growth of Puerto Rican business has outpaced every other ethnic group. The data for 2016 is not yet out. We will put it out as soon as we get it. But the pattern is clear. And this was before the explosion in Florida, by the way. Okay? And if you look at where is it that the businesses are growing, it's New York and Florida. So let's start the conversation there. I know there are other parts and we're all important, but the concentration of businesses, a large number of them. By the way, Centro just put out a report on this. Go to our website and download it. It's free. Or buy the book. The book has it too. Actually, better, buy the book. Yeah. Bring us to your local community, and we'll set a few books there. So we also have challenges, and I've been hammering down on the Medicaid cliff in Puerto Rico, but it also impacts our communities here. The Medicare cliff is so-called because in the Obamacare, the 2010 legislation, allocated a block grant of $6.2 billion. This is familiar to many of you. That block grant expires this year. And Congress just approved a stopgap of about $295 million, which is 1/3 of what Puerto Rico needs to keep current services in health to the population. So this is going to come back to us. It's going to come back in September. Are we ready to go to Congress and lobby to support action to get parity in Medicaid for Puerto Ricans? Okay, it's important. It's also important to defend, just a caveat here, it costs 3 times more to, and we just got a report on that on our website as well, it costs 3 times more to serve a Medicaid recipient in Florida than it cost in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is about $1,500. Meager investment to maintain health services per person there. But if you look at this map, I wanted to relay what's happening in Puerto Rico to the diaspora here, what's happening here, okay? If you look at that map, Puerto Ricans have the highest rates of uninsured in states where Medicaid was not expanded. Those states identify with a pattern. For example, in the South, all those little dots around Georgia and Florida and Texas means that those states controlled by Republican majorities, did not expand Medicaid. They refused the Obamacare offer to expand it. This is especially troublesome in Florida and the South for our population. States where Puerto Ricans have gained the most access to health, such as New York, Connecticut, that expanded Medicaid, those states identified with a flat color on top, those blue things there, are among the most affected by the proposed cuts in Medicaid in Congress right now. The law that was passed in the House will really, really affect Puerto Ricans directly. The uninsured rates will go back to what they were, or perhaps even worse, to what they were before Obamacare. All of that, as I said, are captured in policy briefs that are posted on our website. Some of this analysis, not all of them, but some of it is included in the book as well. So what is the role of Centro? Moving forward, I'd like you guys to tell us a little bit, give us feedback as to what is it that we should be doing. Obviously, we have been convening people, okay? We have been putting out the Puerto Rico information. But there are other things that we have done. I want to talk briefly about that. I think that we have, with this series of conferences, the convening, the analysis, the sharing, the information, the building networks, we have done that with several follow-up to last year. We had an LGBT summit. We had a summit in New England. We had one in December 3rd on parades and festivals. And all of these things have been followed up with trying to organize different people. Parades and festivals, we created a directory. So we counted more than 100 parades and festivals. Can you believe that? Yeah, amazing. But we didn't know that. We're just beginning this thing. We're creating a directory and a calendar where they can all post that. And we are doing that with a feeder, automatic, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get too much into that. But the point is, Centro has become a hub for information, and we need to build that. So there's a long way to go, but we started, okay? But we also have collaborated with other people. In Orlando in 2015, what really started a lot of this stuff was a conference, it was called El Encuentro Nacional de la Diaspora Puerto Rican in October. It was the first time that the caucus of elected officials came out of the closet. They sort of, so we did in New York, obviously the conference last year, but last month we were in Tallahassee, Puerto Rico Day there. September we're going with the Congreso Puertorriqueño to New Jersey. In September we're planning a summit, youth summit back in Holyoke as a follow-up to what we did last year. So Centro is playing that role. But that's not the only thing. Out of the cultural panels last year and youth panels, they wanted to expose our youth to more history, heritage. How can our kids learn more about where they come from? So we created this program, the Cultural Ambassador, and we launched it in November. And since then, we put it online. All the materials are there. You all can all go and be certified as a cultural ambassador. You have to take some quizzes. So we got about 200 people enrolled. About a dozen of them have finished the whole training. We're creating a first boot camp now in May 20 with the Puerto Rican Day Parade. They are giving this year 100 fellowships to kids that are going to college. We are going to provide, a condition to receive that fellowship is that they come to the boot camp. Okay, so we're gonna create a model that we hope to bring around the country. So if you're a parade and festival, if you are a youth service organization, call us. Rosa is around here. You all know Rosa by now. Let her know because we want to take this show on the road. We've also, as a think tank, we have the mandate to produce timely information. So these are two recent publications that you can actually. We got them on time for the conference, so thank you for that. So there are two different products. The State of Puerto Ricans is about short pieces that summarize what we are in health, education, politics, so on and so forth. The Almanac are data sheets that summarize actual data from the census by state and dissected, very detailed. By the way, all of this is on the web too. I prefer that you buy the book, but you can download it too. But if you have events around health or any other issue, you can download it and give it to your people. It's free. This is public funding, and we're proud to serve that way. All this has been produced by Centro researchers and our other collaborators, okay? So where do we go from here? Today, obviously, we're trying to understand, we're raising awareness. We want to participate, listen, respect each other, find common ground, share contact information. But tomorrow really is about what can we do. It's engagement. It's about who is going to do it, how we're going to do it together, right? But more importantly, at the end of the day, I want all the moderators to come and tell us one thing. Last year, we left that open, and it was messy. Okay, so this year, all those conversations we have to summarize in one point. We don't want a lot of mess this year. And we will try to respond to that claim, to that suggestion that all the breakout sessions bring to us. We won't be able to do everything, I promise you that, but I promise too that we will do what we can to keep the ball moving, to keep this rolling, okay? So what can Centro do? We need your feedback on that. But more importantly, I want to end this presentation with what Tony Pantoja told all of us aspirantes at some point. And it was the so-called 3A formula, okay? The 3A formula, any aspirante here? Yeah. Oye, todos son viejos. We gotta do better, we gotta bring more youth. The aspirantes are there, they're not just here, right? So we gotta do better. But the 3A's refers to awareness, analysis, and action. So, it's time for action. Muchas gracias.